voicing your creativity takes you to unexpected places. And so I'm going to do something I didn't plan to do. And before I get into exploring the creative power of sound today and what has sort of led me through my entire life, actually what has brought me to do the work that I've been doing for 30 years. Before I do, given that we told all of you, and thank you for everyone who has come to the workshop, you guys are wonderful and we're really looking forward to tomorrow. I hope none of you are having anticipatory anxiety about the ask that we had that, you know, we'd like you to perform your piece wherever it is. And so I told Vikas, I said, well, you know, I didn't think about it, but maybe I should perform one of my pieces. I mean, I have my wings. I happen to be, just last week we were in Southern California and I ended up having a few shows in San Diego and Los Angeles. And he said, yeah, Shamini, that's fine. You can sing, but like, do you really need, it's the ashram. Like, do you really need the wings, you know? And I said, well, it's the song about imaginal cells. So yeah, I think so. How many of you know what imaginal cells are? I've heard of them. Okay, one person. And I'm just sharing this because this song was inspired by one of my most favorite people on the planet, Bruce Lipton. How many of you have heard of Bruce Lipton? Okay, great. A few of you. Wow. I'm used to going into a room and everyone knows who Bruce is. Bruce is incredible. He is a father of science and spirituality. He has been doing this work literally for decades. He celebrated, I think, his 80th birthday recently, and he has just been a joy to work with. And I wanted to share a bit about my creative process because Vikas and I were talking, you know, we approach poetry, song very differently. First of all, I never thought I could write songs, poetry. It never occurred to me. I was just always called myself a dumb singer. I could sing this, I could sing, you know, that, things that were given to me. But for me, when it happens in a flash. It's just a flash. And so I heard Bruce talking about imaginal cells. And for those of you who have not heard what imaginal cells are, they are actual cells. They are the cells that are in the caterpillar that allow the caterpillar to transform into the butterfly. So they're real cells, and I remember Bruce talking about them during COVID and just kind of pointing out the time of transformation that we're in. And it really inspired me. And so I wrote this song really as a dedication to that. It is off of my album, Kaliyuga Blues. As you can see, I love my wings. This was a picture that was snapped during a performance with the big gold wings. They're bigger. And some photographer was there, took an incredible live snapshot, and then we decided to just make that the album. For those of you who are interested, you can check it out. Each song represents the experience of a chakra. I will warn you, the first few songs are pretty heavy. They kind of draw from my more rock and metal experience. Imaginal cells is the sixth chakra. It is Vishuddha chakra. It is about the promise of what we might wake up to as human beings. And so I happen to know that all of you can sing because I've been listening to you sing kirtan the entire time. And I'm going to invite you, as I perform the piece, to sing the chorus along with me. And so this is the chorus. This is the first chorus, the second. You can see they're very similar. And do you mind if we just go over it one time before we begin the song? Okay, so we'll do it kind of back and forth for a moment. And you can do it an octave lower, obviously. So chorus one goes like this. You cannot see, you cannot feel, you cannot know your end is near. Let's try that. You cannot see, you cannot feel, cannot know your end is near. You cannot tell, you cannot know, you don't know which way you will go. Nice. That is me, and I'm just doing it lower octave for those of you who want to do it lower. That is me and that is you. That is us in the world too. caught in life's duality, striving to be and be free. That's a little low for me. Great. Okay, so I think you got it. The second chorus is very similar, and you'll hear it in the song. So I'll invite you to sing it with me if you'd like, or just feel into the song, whatever you want to do. But it's nice to sing together. So if you'd like to, please do sing with me in the chorus. And Raj, I think we're ready to go. Question my notion of being attached to form or function. Both are untrue, grasping the impermanent and forgetting the infinite. The game of the cosmic, to hide and then see. When the future looks bleak, it's actually ripe for transformation. Striving to be free. Before you jump for simulation, dystopian platform mass sedation, let your heart know the truth. You're already part of creation. Let yourself rearrange. Crossroads. Supporting you cannot see, you cannot feel, you cannot know your everything is here. You cannot tell, you cannot know, you don't know which way you go. You are the truth, you are not, and we are all meant to know. You are truth and you are, and we are all meant to know. if I wasn't brave enough to do that for you, despite the fact that all the things, phlegm for the last month, cracking voice, the whole thing, I don't know why I write songs that are in my passaggio, meaning my voice break, you know, but all the things, right? I had all the reasons not to do this song for you today. But if I'm going to ask you to stand up and be brave and just share your heart, which is what it means to voice your creativity, then I have to do the same. So thank you for indulging me. The truth is this, for me, singing was a way of bringing me home to myself. And I discovered it early on. I actually discovered, should I pull it up a little bit? Yeah, you want me to do that? A little better, so I'm not in the... Thank you, Raj. Uh-oh. There we go. And thank you. I saw a little bit of wing flapping in the audience. I appreciated that. I saw some singing. I forgot to tell you that I'd be singing over you. So thank you for all of you who jumped in and did it and just were brave. So I realized that for me, I probably grew up singing because I grew up wailing, actually. I was a colicky baby with fed formula. And so I learned how to sort of wail for my needs at an early age, and probably also greatly irritated my family. I remember my uncle who was visiting from India once said, I remember visiting you when you were a baby and you would just wail. And so we'd say, put you in the crib, put you in the crib, you know. So I did learn, though, early on that singing was a way of bringing me back home to myself. And I realized much later that it's much more than just self-soothing, which is how we often talk about it in psychology. And I began to just look around, read, try to discover what it was about singing and sound that I found so powerful as I grew up. And we would learn mantra. And I would wonder, like, what is this vibration about? What is this incredible vibration? And it didn't take long before I learned that in every tradition, we talk about sound as the fabric of consciousness. The world is sound, Nada Brahma, in the beginning was the word. Doesn't matter what tradition you talk about. And so I wondered about that. What did they mean? I began to read many different books, and then, of course, discovered, as I'm sure you have, that there are so many, if not in every single tradition, there's singing not just to bring you back home, to soothe your emotions, but divine sound making to bring you back to the whole of who you truly are. And so this is the way I describe sacred sound making. It is, of course, formal, as we do in kirtan, as we chant mantra, as we sing in gospel, as we sing in ceremony, all of these traditions. But it's really a way to bring us back into our connection with the divine. And for me, and I expect for many of you, that connection is a very felt connection. It is the connection with Shakti Ma herself. And because this is also the fabric of her. Now, the sacred science of sound making is vast. And, you know, volumes have been written on the subject. Of course, Sivananda Maharaj has written books on the subject, deep, beautiful books on Nada Yoga. From some perspectives, you can say that here what you're doing is you are bringing the unmanifest with the manifest. And this is part of the power of the sound making that we do, certainly in mantra. But it's really true with all sounds that we make. We're taking what is not yet manifest and making it manifest with intention and deliberate sound. So we begin to literally shape our realities and shape our environments in this way. And of course, the deep science of sound teaches us that there are not just one level of sound here. In the West and Western science, we often focus on the physical and the physical effects, and I will be touching on those a little bit. But as you can see here, these are all the levels of sound that we constantly experience, whether we are aware of them or not. So most of us think of Vekri, the audible speech, the audible sound. This is the sound of, the pressure waves that are going through the air, tickling the cilia in your ear, creating neural impulses, right? This is all the physical aspect of sound, the rain, the clapping, all of it. But then as we chant, we know that we often will feel the energy from the chanting, from the mantra. This is madhyama, the actual subtle sensations that we feel. And many of us may even experience light, which is described as bashanti. And ultimately, sound itself is the one. It is the fabric of the entire universe. And if we were to be lucky to experience para in all of its fullness, we would be fully liberated into the totality of sound, which comprises us even here as earthly beings. So sound then is our nature. It is the nature of everything. And yet, even as these beautiful embodied divine beings that we are, we can then work with sound to help us in our self-realization process, to help work with our emotions, to ignite the Satchit Anand that is inside of us. This is a depiction from one of our Jain scholars, like my last name might kind of belie. I come from the Jain tradition. So in here you have a depiction of the different subtle bodies and kind of the emanations that come from subtle bodies. And just in this two-dimensional picture here, you see Jiva, the soul, is right there in the center. So it's not that Jiva is small or anything like that. They're just showing it as the center. In fact, Jiva is everything, right? But when we engage with the field, with energy and with sound, we're actually able to light up things that may be in the field, that might be in our karmic field, that might be in our emotional body, and even our physical body. And we can move those with sound. And for those of you who were in the workshop today, you had a bit of a felt experience of that, just by working with sound, how you could instantly shift your energy to a place of groundedness or openness, how you could feel into the energetic centers just with a little bit of jumping into the sound in your body. So this is all possible. And then, of course, there is divine inspiration. There is divine guidance. Now, how many of you know something about Jainism or have heard of Jainism before? Okay, just a couple of you. Jainism is a little different from Hinduism in that it split off from Hinduism many moons ago, you can say, in the current times for specific reasons. Jains are mostly known for their adherence to several principles, the most popular one being ahimsa, or nonviolence. So Martin Luther King, Gandhiji were very influenced by Jain teachings. And in Jain traditions, while we recognize gods, we're taught not to pray to God because God is within, right? And yet, I kept seeing this goddess all around in my life when I was growing up. And I kept looking at her, and I would say, who is she? I felt such a deep resonance with her. So as a child, I would ask, who is this goddess? How many of you know of the goddess Saraswati? Okay, good, a good handful of you, but not everyone. She is one of the Vedic goddesses who really represents knowledge and wisdom of all forms. So interestingly, while Jains don't pray to gods, you'll often see Saraswati around the depictions of the liberated masters who have taught the way of nonviolence, of the Jain way. And it is because she is said to give buddhi, absolute wisdom. And what's interesting about her is that when you look at her, you'll see, first of all, there's no separation here between the arts and sciences. They are one. So she's holding a veena, which is a stringed instrument, similar to a sitar, but different. And she's also holding a book in her hand. That might look like money, but it's actually a book. So she's holding a book in her hand. She's also holding a mala, right? Prayer beads. And in the Hindu tradition, and in the Jain tradition too, I would say, she's often prayed to for wisdom, and so students will pray to her to do well on exams. I mean, I could tell you stories of my daughter, deciding that she would pray to Saraswati during Navratri and then miraculously opening her book in an open note test to exactly the page she needed. She came back that day and said, Mom, I think this goddess stuff works. But she's also who we pray to allow for the divine creativity to flow through us in all ways, certainly musically, dance, in every art form. And so her name actually means she who flows. And you see her here with the river. You'll often see her with the river flowing behind her. She doesn't just represent one chakra, but of course there is a deep connection with your creative energy and your Swadhisthana chakra, which we explored a little bit in the workshop today. So she's a really wonderful goddess to connect with when you are looking for divine support in your creative flow. And you'll notice, to pick up on some of the principles that Vikas mentioned in auto orientation, he spoke about awareness, embodiment, expansion, and what was the fourth, Vikas? Equanimity. And he brought up the picture of Saraswati, so you can really see these embodied in her. And in fact, when we are in that auto-orientation, as Vikas mentioned, creativity can just flow. Now, an interesting thing about Saraswati Ma is that she's quite content in herself. She's not typically one of those goddesses that you see depicted with lots of stories about her being the dutiful wife, not quite that, because she is very much involved in her creation, in her creativity. So while she is often paired with Brahma, the creator, there's a sense also of the fullness of her in the creative process. And so as you connect with her, you may ask yourself, how does the creative process lead you to a state of a greater sense of oneness? Now, there is another goddess from the Tantric tradition who can also really support your creativity. And this is one of the Mahavidyas, Matangi. She is known as the goddess of mantra. And you can see here in the depiction of the Tantric wisdom goddesses, they're a bit different from the depictions of the Vedic goddesses. And Matangi, you notice, is also holding a veena. She has many qualities that are very similar to Saraswati, but what do you notice about her in terms of the difference between her and Saraswati here? She's green, yes. Definitely a difference. She's fiery, right? She's a little wilder, right? She's a little bit wilder. Her hair is kind of more out, obviously a different color. There are many stories about Matangi. And one of the names that she goes by is Uchisa Chandali. And we don't have time to get into all of the stories, but essentially what she teaches us is there is no such thing as trash. And in the creative process, this is really important because in these stories, those who may worship Matangi will literally take the leftovers, the things that are dropped on the floor, the things that you would dare not offer maybe to another goddess. But you will offer them to her because she will compost them. She will accept them. She accepts all of you. Even the parts that you think you need to leave behind, you will transform. But you can offer this to her, and she will help you to transform everything that you may be carrying that you think you should just set aside or bury, or think that you're embarrassed to show, or anything like that. So she gives you that sense of bravery and strength in your creative process to show yourself fully and allow for that transformation and that alchemy to continue to take place. So any questions on the goddesses? So this is the ancient wisdom of sound, the divine carriers of sound, the embodiments of sound in these divine feminine forms. We spoke a bit about the 4 levels in the mystical, or you can say the spiritual traditions. As just one example from the Vedic teachings. But if sound is really the fabric of who we are, how does that show up in the physical world? How does it show up in our own physical healing? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time now talking about that. Really talking a little bit more about the science of sound as we know it, and just touching on a few things, because again, the science is vast and it's growing. There's so much here. We're going to talk a little bit about the sacred sound in our bodies. And so, when we talk about these studies, most of them, because most of science is based still on the material, though we're beginning to move beyond just the material now, and we'll be talking more about that later tonight and tomorrow. Most of this is kind of looking at the body. So it's saying, okay, if we make sounds, if we sing, if we do devotional singing, how does that actually show up physically in our body? And so we look at things like the effects on the nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic aspects of the nervous system, the vagus nerve. How many of us have heard of the vagus nerve? Great. Okay. Wonderful. So we have learned so much about how sound making can affect the vagus nerve. And because it affects the vagus nerve, it will affect our hormones and it will affect our immune system. And so here is some of what we have already learned. This is specifically looking at devotional type of singing, including mantra or mantra practice, which is not always sung, but often silent. Most of these studies, though, are done with chanting mantra out loud. Mantram, which is a slightly different practice. Kirtan, of course, and devotional singing. So if we bring these things together, what we learn is indeed we are enhancing our vagus nerve activity. And this probably makes sense to you, right? Because if you think about even when you breathe and if you elongate with a sound. So let's just do that as an example. Let's just do a nice Om. It's immediate, right? You can feel that. So just by that long exhalation and the vibration of the sound in the nerve, we are activating the vagus. That is allowing the nervous system to relax. And when we do this continuously and repeatedly, and some of these studies, by the way, like the study with Kirtan that I'm thinking of that was published by our collaborators at UC San Francisco, they took naive people who had never done Kirtan before, and they just had them do 6 weeks of chanting with Kirtan compared to just listening to music. And they saw profound effects in cell aging. They saw shifts in the enzyme of telomerase, which is involved in the cell aging process in your body. Pretty profound. They didn't have any experience of it at all. So it's pretty amazing. And we see this, of course, in terms of mental health and mental well-being. We've seen decreases in depression, anxiety, and even decreases in our sense of trauma and our trauma symptoms. And of course, a greater sense of spiritual connection. So all of that is there. And community singing in health, singing together, and most of this has been done with chorus singing, is incredible as well. And as you can imagine, when we sing together, as is felt here, you feel a stronger sense of social connection and social support, which is so important for our times. So singing together is healing together. And of course, there is still quite a bit more to explore here. So interestingly, not all music is the same, as you can imagine. The differences in music that we have will determine the shifts in things like our heart rate variability, the dance of the heart. You find the music that works for you. It's not necessarily that one music works for everyone. So you find the music that works with your nervous system. So, and how? You know, this is just one example of some of the studies that we found, again, because we are shifting our mood, our immune system, our nervous system all together. Now, it's not necessarily like one affects the other, affects the other. These things are working in concert. So just as we're feeling the spiritual benefits, we're also feeling the physiological benefits at the same time. Now, over time, we'll look for a longer time at things like changes in inflammatory cytokines, even cell subsets, to see how long will those practices last? How long could those health benefits be for us? And so the jury is still very much out. But the more you sing, the more you're going to be running your joy juice. The more you're running your joy juice, the more you're shifting the cocktail of hormones in the body, and therefore providing a, kind of a baseline of hormones so that you can regulate your inflammation better. Because we live in an inflammatory world. There are things that are going to happen. We are going to get stressed out. So it's not even just about, okay, now I need to go bliss out and sing, but you're literally training your nervous system when you're singing in this way, so that when a stressor comes in, you're not going to react quite as quickly as you may have. Again, linking with what Vikas said, singing is a way of preventing you from jumping into auto disorientation. So you can maintain the orientation greater over time. And that's how you can benefit your health and your stress reactivity. What is also interesting is now we're really beginning to more deeply understand that sound is penetrating through our bodies. And so there's, of course, incredible advances that are being made in sound, whether it's transcranial focused ultrasound, for example, that's being used to potentially ablate tumors in Alzheimer's disease. This is using sound waves. We're familiar, of course, with regular ultrasound. There's some interesting data that's just coming out from some archaeologists that are using radar translated into sound waves to actually explore what may have been going on in the pyramids in Egypt. And so they may, in fact, be uncovering some incredible structures through the use of sound, discovering potentially, the jury's still out on this, they still need to peer review publish this stuff, but it's pretty incredible. They're actually beginning to recognize some of the ancient technologies that were being used in the pyramids, being able to deduce the actual structures that were being created in these pyramids underneath the ground to work with energy through sound. We've learned now that sound can actually even levitate objects. Now we're looking at that on the very microscopic level, but we don't know. It could very well be that the ancient cultures knew much more about the power of sound and its use in technology than we do today. And hopefully that would change. But one of the things that we've recently discovered is that your brain is actually communicating through sound waves. So the sound waves are actually creating the electrical pulses in the brain. You can imagine if the brain is communicating, if the nerves are actually communicating through sound waves, then what happens when you feed through your own voice, through your own sound making, the sound in your heads? And of course, it's not just humans. Now that we have begun to explore the nature of sound and the effects of sound on biology, we're beginning to learn so much. For example, that we can feed mycelia certain kinds of sound and help them grow. Of course, we've known that plants absorb sound and that there's certain types of music and sound that we can bring to them. But this is really incredible because we're learning that everything is vibrating, everything is alive, and that we can choose to feed each other through the sounds that we make. And that includes, our brothers and sisters in the plant and the animal and the mineral kingdom, right? And science is just beginning to explore this. Now, what if we could visualize sound? Have any of you ever heard of the cymoscope? A couple of people. So this is a dear colleague of mine, John Stewart Reed, who's done a lot to kind of bring forth some of the initial findings and the postulations of esteemed scientists like Hans Jenny to the forefront. And he has been primarily working with the cymoscope now, looking at water. And so what they do is they can actually place sound through the cymoscope into a membrane of water and begin to visualize the structure of that sound. So as John likes to remind us, sound isn't actually 2D. It's not just a sinusoidal wave as we kind of see it on a 2D thing. It's a bubble. It's, you can say a hologram. And so as such, it can be visualized. Here's an example of a sound healer whose name some of you may be familiar with, of Jonathan Goldman, an incredible sound healer. And here he is chanting into the water, and you see this incredible structure. It's a sevenfold geometry that John says only manifests with certain folks. So incredible what we can see when we can visualize the sound. Now, what about the sounds between us? We talked a bit about what happens when we practice sound and what happens to my nervous system and what happens to my emotions and what happens to my health. What happens between us? Well, we synchronize. That's what's amazing. And we can look at this now by looking at the synchrony of our hearts when we come together to sing, even the synchrony of our brains. And we're drawn to this, right? That's a reason why we sing together. And how many of you have engaged in singing bowls or Tibetan bowls, right? Many of you. Just beginning to look a little bit more at that work, but there's just a handful of studies now looking at the effects of Tibetan sound bowls. And again, just real basic stuff to begin with, because unfortunately, this type of work is not really adequately funded by the National Institutes of Health. Now that is beginning to change with luminaries like Renee Fleming and Francis Collins, who started a really wonderful and robust program of music research. And Renee is certainly open to sound healing as well. Now, of course, with the current situation and the removal of a lot of funding from the National Institutes of Health, it ends up being that most of us, when we're looking to do studies in these areas of energy and of sound, are really doing these with the support of private foundations, but some really wonderful work that has occurred with the support of those foundations as well. I'm going to speak a little bit about one of those studies that we did. So there are many sound healers, as you may know, that may use bowls, but some of them use things like tuning forks. Anybody ever had an experience of someone using tuning forks for sound? So I have been collaborating with a sound healer now for several years who's developed a process that she calls Biofield tuning. And her name is Eileen McCusick. And she has developed a process where she actually works with the sound to feel into the energy field of a person. We've been doing studies for a number of years, and we were actually, before COVID, going to do a study looking at the effects of this biofield-based sound approach for post-traumatic stress disorder. Then COVID hit, so it wasn't the time where we could really get people into a physical space to do it. And I called her and I said, well, Eileen, I know that you and your practitioners are not just sitting on your hands right now, because there are a lot of people that need the work that you're doing. So how is it that you're delivering your care right now? She said, oh, it's no problem. We just deliver it on the phone. I said, well, tell me about that. She said, it's no big deal. We just project a hologram of the person, right here, and we use the sound, and we tune into the hologram of the person. And when we do that, we're just sort of feeling into the field, and we're doing it exactly as if they were on the table. I said, okay, so tell me more about what that's like. Well, we're feeling into certain parts of their field, away from the body. And when we feel the stagnation, we might ask them, what is that about? Because they have a whole map. She's created a whole sort of meaning-making mind map, you can say, of what it means if I feel a stagnation out here in the field or kind of closer to the body or near my shoulder. And so they may ask questions. Did something happen to you when you were at age 4? Or I'm feeling into, some upset that happened at this age. And that's about it. That's all they'll say, usually. And she said, and then we do the drag and drop. I said, well, okay, so tell me about what's the drag and drop? Well, I feel the perturbation. Here's the body. I feel the perturbation. I move the energy back into the central channel. I drop it, and I allow for that energy to move through the central channel. So I'm moving that stagnation. So I'm describing this to you, and most of you aren't sitting here like this, which is good, because when I speak this to most scientists, they're like, what are you talking about? But you're practitioners, and most of you have probably had energy work, so you may be curious, or you may say, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Well, to the mainstream researcher, this doesn't make much sense, but I said, we ought to look at this. Let's just see if we get a signal. Will people even do this? Is there any effect whatsoever? And so, of course, at this time, over 30% of people, I think, during the pandemic had basically diagnosable levels of generalized anxiety. So we had no problem recruiting for the study, and we did a very small, what we call feasibility pilot, just to determine whether people would do this. Would they receive the healings? Would they fill out the questionnaires? We had them speak into a phone line to a prompt, how was your day? We interviewed them after to just kind of get their experience of what it was like and what they noticed. And so from that, here's what we learned, really. We had 5 different practitioners who were trained, and they only received 3 sessions over 3 weeks. This was really brief, right? We just had a small amount of funding to get started, and we really wanted to see if there was a signal. It's usually the first thing that you'll want to do before you power for a randomized controlled trial. So we looked at gold standard measures of anxiety, perceived stress, positive and negative affects, spiritual experiences. We also wanted to then measure in their own words, was there a correspondence between what they would say if we just asked them blanket each week, how was your day or how was your week? And they would just speak into how their week was. And then we analyzed that for positive emotions and negative emotions, just to see if there was, any correspondence of like their own felt sense of the day versus just filling out questionnaires. And then we asked them in their own words what the experience was like. And so this is what we found. Overall, this is what we found. Statistically and clinically large drops in anxiety, as well as stress and negative affect. Interestingly, we didn't see a significant improvement in positive affect or positive emotions, though it did move in that direction. Now, of course, we had a small sample. But these are the results. And you can see here, if most of you are probably not familiar with the specific scale of the state trait anxiety inventory, but they're starting out at pretty high levels here. I mean, we're at like a level of 54 or so when they're starting. And they have actually dropped to preclinical levels, meaning they wouldn't meet criteria for generalized anxiety disorder anymore after just 3 weeks of receiving the sound healing. Similar changes for trait anxiety. And as you might imagine, their use of negative emotion words changed over time too, in their own words to the prompt, how was your day? Over time, they just tended to use less negative emotion words to describe how their day was, suggesting that their felt experience and their emotional experience of the day was also less negative, not just through a questionnaire. And what was also interesting, of course, is the things that you can't quite tap into with questionnaires. So a lot of them were perplexed because the healers using this sound-based approach, and they really are using sound, they're using sound to feel into, and some of them feel into it kinesthetically, but they're also listening to the tone of the fork. And so when they're hitting the fork, they can literally hear from the tone of the fork whether they're hearing an emotion. And so they'll say, the fork sounds sad. Because over time, they have learned what it sounds like when they feel and hear the sadness. So when they feel that, right, then they may ask what happened. And so here's some examples. What happened when you were 8? What happened 5 years ago? 5 years ago, my dad died. How do you pick a year in a person's life that you never met and say what happened? I mean, they're not even in the same room, right? And they would literally feel the stuckness in the field as well when the practitioner is hitting it And so when the practitioner would vocalize something, they would be actually feeling it at the same time, which for them was profound. And because some of the stuff we might carry in our field, but we're not necessarily always conscious of it, it becomes a very powerful way to begin to work with subconscious impressions. You can call them sanskars, right? To be able to clear those from the field in a more robust way. Their relationship with anxiety also changed. And this is key because we see this, of course, in mindfulness-based interventions and other interventions as well. When we come back home to ourselves, we realize that we're not our anxiety. We're not our depression. We're not our stress. We can now observe that process. We can actually have some self-love and self-forgiveness, as well as forgiveness of others. And this really came out in the data as well. And I love the second one, but the anxiety started releasing by the second session into where I realized that those to-dos are still going to be there, but it's just how I approach it. And I was able to breathe through it, to get through the next step and move through it on that level. So a stronger sense of self-acceptance, because it's, again, the sound is helping to return them back to home, to who they are. That's my hypothesis. So now we used all of that data to power for a randomized controlled trial. I'm pleased to say that we have just collected data on our 100th person. We're comparing with a health education control. So here, I'm not necessarily interested in proving in the study that energy is real. I'll speak more about that tomorrow. I'm interested to know if it's effective. I'm interested to know if, compared to a typical health education control that someone might get of here's how to treat your anxiety, whether this very scalable and teachable approach, because you don't need an MD to do it, you don't need a PhD to do it, you don't even need a master's degree to do it, you do need training, there's a certification process as there is with so many of these energy-based therapies. This is healing on the community level. This is us being able to tap into the subtle awareness of ourselves and each other to work with that field and space between us to foster healing in a very deep and beautiful way. And really pleased to be working with my collaborators also in UCSD. We're going to be exploring just fun changes, exploring just a smattering of data we have on the microbiome, because a lot of what we talk about with these energy-based approaches are about digesting emotions. So we talk about it in that way. And it's only recently, really in the past 5+ years, maybe 10 at the most, where we've really begun to discover that, yes, there are these shifts in the microbiome with our mental emotional states, right? And so now what happens when we shift our mental emotional states through energy work, through spiritual work, through nutrition, through meditation, so many ways. But can something as immaterial, seemingly immaterial as sound and energy shift the microbiome in ways that relate to shifts in anxiety? We're very interested to find out. So that was a bit of review, and for our close, I'd like to invite you, if you didn't already, of course, during the beautiful meditation where the rain was just flowing so beautifully, to explore these different levels of subtlety of sound for yourself tonight and tomorrow. And I'll share with you a passage from this beautiful interpretation of the Vigyan Bhairav Tantra. The Radiant Sutras is the name of this particular book. It's not the book that people write, is this the book you wrote? No, the book I wrote is called Healing Ourselves. I'll talk more about that maybe tomorrow. I don't know if it's still in the bookstore. It might be. But here is something for you to contemplate tonight. Bodies feed on sound. Sonic waves on inner waters nourish every nerve. Vibration strengthens bones. Ecstatic undulation awaits you. Take a bite of crunchy K, slippery S, a rugged R. Enjoy a yummy vowel. Ah, e, oo, or oo. Throw it in a bowl of mmm. Treasure the impact on your tongue. Cream, shreem, ram, yum, cream, lum. Pronounce a sound out loud and then whisper softly. Now hear with your inner ear. Allow the resonance to enchant you within. The sound goes on, resounding, continuing of itself as the hum dissolves into silence. Be nurtured in the tenderness of infinite space. And so we'll close with an invocation and gratitude to Saraswati Ma. If you know this chant, please chant it with me. Om Vagdevi cha vidmahi Brahma Patni cha dhimahi Tanno Vani Prachodhyat Svaha. Thank you for your gracious time and attention. For those that are interested, you can scan this. You will get a grounding with sound practice and a video dialogue with one of my favorite people, Bruce Lipton.
So I'd like to give another very big hand to Dr. Shamini Jain, the beautiful presentation tonight. And we look forward for the continuation of the program and the special program with Dr. Shamini Jain and Vikas Srivastava titled Voice Your Creativity. Tomorrow we'll have another workshop at 12 o'clock and then another presentation tomorrow in the evening satsang. So now we go over the rest of the schedule for tomorrow. Tomorrow morning we'll have the satsang here at 6 a.m. And Swami Brahmananda Ji will continue the teachings on the subject of happiness and freedom. 8 o'clock we'll have the yoga classes. We'll see according to the weather in the morning, the locations. Then 9:50 the brunch, 11 o'clock the ashram welcome and history tour, living from reception. At 12 o'clock we'll have here the workshop with Dr. Shamini Jain and Vikas Srivastava and Voice Your Creativity. Then at 2 o'clock we'll have the workshop with Dr. Suhash Kshirsagar and Dr. Manisha Kshirsagar, titled Lighter and Brighter, the introduction to the benefits of cleansing and specifically the Khichdi cleanse. Then at 4 o'clock the yoga classes, 5:50 the dinner, 7 o'clock the chanting of the Bhagavad Gita, followed by a short study in the main temple. And then in the evening satsang we'll continue the program Voice Your Creativity with Dr. Shamini Jain and Vikas Srivastava. Tomorrow also we are having the last part of the special Pangu Qigong, mystical Qigong training. And tomorrow it will be also at 12 o'clock in the Annapurna Devi house with Olivia O. And this will be the level 3 on healing skills. So learning the method for sending healing energy to others. And for joining this, one had to do the level 1 training yesterday. And if you'd like to join, highly recommended. You can register at the reception. And for tomorrow, we still have a few spots available for receiving private healing sessions. So also for that, you can register at reception. Tomorrow also we'll be having the graduation ceremony for all those who participated as part of this program, Heal Yourself and Others with Mystical Qigong. So first we'd like to congratulate all the participants and Olivia for concluding, so you can give them all a very big hand. And they will be having the graduation ceremony at 2:15 at the Vanadurga Temple with our priest Krishnam Budriji. Tonight we also have several requests to dedicate the final prayers. First of all, we'd like to dedicate the final prayers to Jean. This is the mother of our Wellbeing Center manager, long time staff of this organization in this ashram, Padmavati. Her mother Jean passed away today. So we'd like to dedicate the final prayers for the peaceful transition of the soul. Also, we have a request from one of our TTC students, Jenna, for her friend Chris Campolo, who also recently passed away. So we'd like to dedicate the final prayers for the peaceful transition. Also, one of our guests requested to dedicate the final prayers for a friend, Mark Lang, who had an open heart surgery today. So for the quick and full recovery back to radiant health for Mark Lang. And also one of our TTC and ATTC graduates who is a guest now here at the ashram, Shivakami. Her son has his birthday today, Dario Mashat. So where's Shivakami? Shivakami is here. So we wish a very happy birthday to Dario, and we dedicate the final prayers for his long life, good health, peace, prosperity, and spiritual liberation on this very birth. So this is on page 97.
Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivadanam Muruvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityo Mukshyamamritat. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivadanam Muruvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityo Mukshyamamritat. Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivadanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityo Mukshyamamritat. Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu, Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu, Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu, Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kasyat Tukapag Bhavet. Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, let us abide in thee forever and ever. Molo Sadguru Shivananda Maharaj ki Jai. Shri Guru Vishnavananda Maharaj ki Jai. Please stand up for the Aarti. You can follow along. Page 118. Om Jai Jarati Vina Vinayaka Vina Vinayaka Shri Ganesha Jai Jarati Subramanya Subramanya Kartikeya Jai Jarati Venugopala Venugopala Venulola Papa Vidura Navanita Chora Jai Jarati Venkataraman Venkataramana Sangadaharana Sitarama Radheshyamaha Jai Jarati Gauri Manohara Gauri Manohara Bhavani Shankara Samba Sadashiva Uma Maheshwara Jai Jarati Rajarajeshwari Rajarajeshwari Tripura Sundari Mahalakshmi Mahasaraswati Mahakali Mahashakti Jai Jarati Anjaneya Anjaneya Hanumantaha Jai Jarati Dattatreya Dattatreya Trimurtya Bhatara Jai Jarati Adityaya Adityaya Bhaskaraya Jai Jarati Shanishwaraya Shanishwaraya Bhaskaraya Jai Jarati Shankaracharya Shankaracharya Advaita Gurave Jai Jarati Sadgurunata Sadgurunata Shivananda Jai Jarati Vishnudevananda 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 Jai Jarati Agastya Munaye Agastya Munaye Shri Rama Priyaye Jai Jarati Ayyappa Swamiye Ayyappa Swamiye Dharma Shastave Jai Jarati Jesus Gurave Moses Gurave Buddha Gurave Jai Jarati Muhammad Gurave Guru Nara Gurave Samazarevyo Namaha Jai Jarati Venugopala Om Natatra Suryo Bhati Nachandatarakam Nema Vidyota Bantikato Yamagnihi Tam Eva Bantamanabhati Sarvam Tasya Bhasa Sarvindam Vibhati Om Gange Chayamune Chayvagudavari Saraswati Narmade Sindhu Kaveri Namastabhyam Namo Namaha Tvameva Mata Chapita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhu Sasaka Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravinan Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Kayena Vacha Manasendriyarava Buddhiyan Manava Prakritye Swabhavan Karomi Adiyat Sakalam Parasmahi Nara Yanaiti Samarpayami Sarvadharmam Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Raja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayishami Ma Sucha.
Om Namah Shivaya. So one just announcement before everybody goes. Also, tomorrow morning we are starting and continuing the special study of the Mandukya Upanishad with Swamini Atmaprakashananda Saraswati Maharaj. So this will be, we'll be having a special inauguration ceremony, a puja, with our priest Krishnambudri at 8:15 in the Sivananda hall, and then starting the daily study with Swamini Atmaprakashananda. So please have some prasad, everybody, before you go. And if you could kindly help us just to tidy up for the morning meditation, and have a good night. Om Namah Shivaya.